Back in the mid-90s, my family and I lived in a cozy log cabin on a sprawling 10-acre property located in a rural area that was only 10 minutes away from town. It wasn't the most remote location, but you could still hear the distant sound of banjo music playing in the background every once in a while. At the end of our long, winding driveway was a state highway, which was essentially just a narrow, winding road that wound its way through the dense forest. Every morning, I would trudge my way down to the end of the driveway to wait for the school bus. And when I returned home in the afternoon, I would make a quick stop at the mailbox to retrieve the day's mail. One Monday morning, I stepped outside to grab the mail, only to discover that our mailbox was nowhere to be found. It looked like someone had yanked it right out of the ground. My dad was understandably furious. He stormed down to the county sheriff's office, which was located just a mile down the road, to report the incident. It turned out that this had been happening all up and down the road for months. Someone had been driving by with a chain, yanking mailboxes out of the ground with their vehicle. The culprit was suspected to be a guy down the road with a massive lifted 4WD truck, but nobody had any solid proof. The incidents usually happened on Saturday and Sunday nights, with the homeowners discovering the damage in the morning. It seemed that the nicer the mailbox, the more of a target it became. People had tried everything from digging deeper holes to using more durable wood, but the guy just saw it as a challenge and continued to rip them out with his monster truck. My dad, being the stubborn, determined, and inventive man that he was, decided to take on the challenge himself. He went to Lowe's and bought the fanciest, most expensive mailbox he could find. He then proceeded to install it on top of an 8-foot-long cylinder made of 3 inches diameter hardened tool steel. But he wasn't done there. After digging a deep hole with a post hole digger, he dropped the steel core into it and filled it in with quick-set concrete. To make it look like a standard mailbox, he used strips of 1/2 inches wood to cover the steel core. He primed and painted them, and even had my mom decorate it with flowers and other decorative elements. He wanted it to look as tempting of a target as possible. It didn't even take a week for the truck-driving mailbox vandal to strike again. I went out to grab the mail in the morning, and to my surprise, the mailbox was still there, but this time it was attached to a 30-foot chain and a hitch assembly. The chain had been ripped right off the truck's frame, shearing the bolts in the process. It was a sight to behold. When the sheriff came to investigate, he couldn't help but laugh at the scene. He headed over to the suspected guy's house and verified that the damage to his truck matched. As it turned out, messing with mailboxes was a federal crime that could land you in federal prison, not just the cushy state penitentiaries. The sheriff's department unofficially rewarded my dad with a few cases of beer and some venison, and every deputy in town would flash him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. It was a moment of triumph that would go down in our family history as one of the most memorable events to ever happen on our property. And as for the mailbox, it stood tall and proud, unscathed by any future attempts to take it down.
I remember the Christmas when my parents got us season passes for Six Flags. It was the best gift ever. We used those passes throughout the summer as a family and had an incredible time. We would spend the whole day riding roller coasters and going on water rides. It was one of these days when something special happened. We waited in line for one of the more popular rides, which was at the 45-minute wait point. This was relatively good for this ride, as you could wait for up to an hour and a half at its busiest points. We got into line excited to share this ride with our dad, as it's one of the few he can ride since he has a bad back injury that makes just walking around extremely painful at times. As we were in line, laughing and making jokes while watching the little TVs they have at various points in the line, a group of people rudely cut us and stood in front of us. Our dad has a habit of not letting things slide, so we all braced ourselves, waiting for him to go off on these people for cutting us. To our surprise, he didn't say anything. With confused looks, we turned to our dad, wondering why he hadn't told them off and to get behind us. He just looked at us with a look in his eyes, saying, "Wait for it." We shrugged it off and continued our wait. We didn't make it too far into the line at this point, so it was still about a 45-minute wait. As we got closer to the front of the line, we got more and more excited, waiting to get on the ride with our dad and have a great time. The way the line is set up is before you get into the loading station, there is a two-way staircase that has the regular line on one side and the fast pass line on the other. And at the top of the stairs, there are workers making sure the people in the fast pass line are supposed to be there. This is where my dad struck. After waiting 45 minutes in line behind the cutters, we stood at the top of the stairs, and my dad signaled for a worker's attention. Once he received it, he pointed to the group that had cut us and calmly stated that they had cut us at the beginning of the line. The worker then politely told the group they would need to leave the line and go back to the beginning. They were pissed, but followed the instructions and left the line. The worker thanked my father for informing them, and suddenly the pieces slid into place in our minds. Our dad purposely waited until the very last minute to make them have to wait another 45 minutes, plus more time as the line was longer now that it was later in the day and more people had arrived. I couldn't help but laugh as I watched them walk out of the line and back towards the beginning, hoping they learned their lesson not to cut after that.
Years ago, shortly after I moved out, my father had a bad experience with a contractor he had hired to remodel his bathroom. My father had hired a local contractor who I will call Jack, as he had fixed a clogged sink for him once. Right from the start, my father was extremely skeptical of contractors and did not want to get scammed. So after they agreed on the price for labor, my dad asked Jack for an invoice for the cost of all the materials. He took said invoice to one of his coworkers whose brother-in-law was a plumber or in construction, to look over the list of materials and see if the quote was fair. Right off the bat, Jack was trying to do close to a 50% markup on the materials. Instead of paying Jack's invoice, my dad just bought all the materials himself, saying he knows a guy who gives him amazing discounts. So Jack doesn't get suspicious that my dad was onto his game. 3 months passed, and the bathroom was not even close to being done, despite Jack telling him it would take 2 months. My dad had to travel for work and would be gone for a week, so he asked me to house sit / make sure Jack showed up to work and did not steal anything. Right off the bat, Jack tried to be all buddy-buddy with me, but I did not like the guy and just brushed him off, asking how the bathroom was coming. Over the course of the week, Jack tried to upsell me on a bunch of things he said needed to be done to finish the bathroom, most of which was electrical work which he did not have a license for. My dad filled me in before he left about what was quoted in the labor, and there was no electrical work quoted, so I told Jack to just stick to the original quote. Once my dad came back, I filled him in on all the additional charges Jack tried to tack on. He also did not show up for 3 days, saying he hurt his shoulder tripping over his cat. Then he tried to install the new ceiling light, which he was not asked to install because we had an electrician coming to install it. After a heated discussion between Jack and me, he stopped installing the ceiling light and started laying tile, during which he broke a quarter of the tiles. It was a complete disaster. My dad did some investigating and looked up Jack's license and found out that not only was the license expired, but it did not belong to Jack. My dad asked my brother and me to come over when he was going to confront Jack about lying about his license. A very heated argument broke out when my dad refused to let Jack enter the house to collect his tools, and said we would bring the tools out to him. Jack then threatened to press charges against me for assault when I accidentally brushed his shoulder when I was passing him in the hallway, and I refused to apologize. After the cops showed up, Jack quickly tried to play the victim, but the cops told Jack to collect his tools and leave. The bathroom was still unfinished, but my dad did not have to pay Jack for his 3 months of labor and used that money to hire real contractors to finish the bathroom. It only took them a week and a half to finish. After this, my dad contacted the local news to tell them about Jack being a con man. A few months later, the news did an investigative story about him, and they found other people Jack scammed, where Jack would start to work on their bathroom, but once he got paid, he would cut and run, leaving the bathroom unfinished and stealing all the materials. The news then set up a sting for Jack and exposed him for being a con man, and he was arrested.
Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Thank you.